Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played for 11 seasons in the National Hockey League with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings, and of course, appeared as a contestant on the Survivor television show. And this is the Laidlaw and Allen podcast. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And of course, now what we're talking about the most is the pandemic and the impact on that. And Tom, it seems like we're marching toward the idea that we're going to create this environment in which the hockey players can hope that they're safe and then play games and probably neutral sites where without fans. And it just seems to me like that's where we're headed. Nothing's been finalized, but I think everyone's sort of operating under the assumption. And I was told actually last night that this week the league sort of notified general managers what was going on, and then subsequently the GMs sort of notified their staffs. And what they were told is that Gary Bettman's position, which is the league position, I shouldn't say Gary's because I'm sure it's in consultation with the Board of Governors, is that, we can't allow the calendar to dictate what we're going to do. We need to allow what's happening here on planet Earth dictate, what we're doing. In other words, they want to play a full season, but they can play a full season and start next season, December 1st, because they can play all of June and the Olympics, which had been not canceled but postponed and then rescheduled for next summer, wouldn't start to July. So they could just go to the end of June again. So essentially we could play, if say we started in July, we could play continuously the end of this season and that season, from July all the way through till almost the following July. So a full calendar year. So, he has planted that seed that let's not get carried away just because, maybe we won't get it started in July. Maybe it's going to start in August, but we can still sort of get this done if everybody, but we're going to do it carefully. And, I think that's the only way to approach it, to be honest with you.
So the theory, the goal is still to try to finish this regular season, so have a complete season.
Yeah.
Okay, so then so we'll talk about a few things. The draft being one. So you complete the full season, and you think about it. So the teams that don't make the playoffs for this coming season, they're then going to get a longer break, right? They get that long break, and then as teams get eliminated, they're getting break. So the two teams that go to the finals are going to turn around and start playing right away again.
Well, that's sort of what happens anyway, but. They have a little bit longer. In other words, because we hear it all the time. Well, it's a pretty short summer, but it was worth it. You hear that.
The theory is that these guys wouldn't get any summer at all. There's no break. You go right from finishing the season, starting the next one.
Yeah. If that happens, they want to do it beforehand, obviously. But, the message was only that, look, if it doesn't happen right away, that doesn't mean we can't do it. Like, in other words, I took it as meaning just because they're not playing by, the end of June, they're not going to cancel the season. They're going to see what's, kind of going on. Now, with all that being discussed, there's, they've got to sort of figure out where they're going to play. They want to play in places where there are multiple rinks, obviously. Right. So, that's why, Buffalo has probably come up. I wouldn't be shocked if Columbus is a possibility because they have the rink right next door as well. Yep. And one of the things that concerns me as a journalist is that it doesn't appear that there would be any dressing room access for reporters, right, and that it would be virtual interviewing. And I guess my concern for that would be the long term. Like, are we going to get too used to this for athletes, and then when we get sort of back to quote normal, will we lose our dressing room privileges?
So that's interesting. So about all the years you did it, so you probably could speak to this better than anybody else. So you can still, if you do it virtually, you'll still have the ability to ask the question. Is it that big of a difference that you being in front of the person?
Yeah, well, it is for a variety of reasons. Now, this would take a long time to explain. Now, I would say this, the art of reporting, requires being able to ferret out information that other journalists sometimes can't get. And the way it used to work in the 1980s is because there were fewer journalists, you could what we call work the room. Sure. You'd go in a room, you'd hang around, like if I was working the old Rangers room, I might ignore Tom Laidlaw because Larry Brooks was there talking to you. Sure. But I'd be over talking to John Van Beesbrook. Yep. And, Frank Brown would be talking to Mark Pavlich, and, somebody else would be talking to Ron Greshner, and we'd all be getting sort of a different perspective. And, you then would shape your story based on the perspectives that you've gotten from the players you interview. Well, over time, it's sort of evolved to where we're feeding at the same trough now. Mm-hmm. Now, the way it works now is they tend to want to bring players don't congregate in the dressing room anymore. Yeah. They all leave. Yep. And they come back one at a time for an interview. So we feed at the same trough. Right. Heinrich Lundqvist is, standing there, and there are 43 people standing around him. And, that's not ideal. But in some, when a team is on the road, you still can sort of work the room. It doesn't work like that. Guys don't have anywhere to go when they're in their road dressing rooms. Yeah. So, if I'm here working in Detroit and the Penguins come to town, if I'm going to the Penguins room, there's first of all not going to be very many reporters there because they're in Detroit. And I might be able to go up to Evgeny Malkin or Chris Letang and strike up a conversation and get more information. I hesitate to call it an exclusive because you're not breaking Watergate. You're just talking to the guys, but you get unique content. And when you're doing things virtually, there's no unique content. Yeah. So every story will be the same. Obviously you can always write your perspective just based on an observation of watching the game. So, but that's my fear. And I think that's never good. I think that's not good for society as well. I mean, you want, unique content. We all, the press's role in government and in all things is recognized, by the forefathers.
And there's a lot of people out there that I talk to who are kind of concerned about that in society as general, right? Like in general, what state was it? I can't remember. A state around here where they're planning on using drones to watch how people are congregating and even be able to take their temperature using the drones. Yeah. They're talking about our privacy. Now, I'm one that believes that our privacy is gone anyways, right? There's cameras everywhere we go.
Yeah. Well,
now it's another step.
That's just, that's an issue that's so hard and, probably, not the topic for a sports show, but that is an issue that, and I saw some statistic about the UK that they have those, cameras where there's virtually just a small percentage of any urban area that isn't covered by a camera, which has really changed law enforcement considerably. And, we know from all watching television that you're often caught, by cameras that you weren't counting on, if you're
our expectation for privacy is gone. I mean,
that for sure. But, the question is, and this is what some players have asked me through the years, that do I have an obligation to talk to you? I'm just playing hockey and my contract, but I think it's inherent. Even though it's not, there are regulations that says that you have to appear to the media and all that, but it's not in your contract, but it's implied. You know
what? I actually think it's good for the player that he's talking to the press too. Right? I think because you're going to write a story anyways, and if you don't have any other information, if you don't know how the player felt during that particular play or the game, then you're just going to write what you were told. But as an athlete, I'm proud of my career. I'm proud of what people think of how I perform out there. And if somebody has a perception that I didn't try on the play or whatever, and that just wasn't accurate. If you have a chance to explain, have the reporter ask you the question and then explain your side of what happened out there, now it's like you're almost defending yourself. Because really, it's funny, I never looked at this way when I was a player, but now, looking back at things now, you really are your own brand. Even if you're not like a marketing or branding guy like a PK Subban or something, if you're just a regular player, what the fans think of you is still important, right? I mean, you want them to know that you have come to perform, that how you felt during that play, that you didn't intentionally make a mistake or what your thought process was. So I do think for players, and it's important they talk to the reporter and explain how they're feeling.
Well, and I think you grow as an athlete by that. If you're forced to do self-analysis to explain yourself, you maybe you don't want to think about it. And I think it's important that you feel a little pain when you make mistakes in life, because you don't want to feel that again. So, you need to correct that. So if you have to actually think about why you made the mistake you did, then, that'll make you a better player. Where if you tend to think, I'm just not going to think about it, I'm going to have 3 beers and enjoy a chia seed smoothie that Tom Laidlaw makes me. And then I'm going to go to bed and not worry about it. Well, then you're not going to improve. Like, you in any profession,
absolutely,
self-analysis is important to sort of.
But it's interesting you say that, though. You grow with that, right? Because when you're that young athlete, you come in, you think you're perfect, you think you're never going to make mistakes. Why is somebody criticizing me? And in most cases, especially as an athlete, everybody's always been telling you how great you are all the way up, right? You can do whatever you want to do. You're the greatest. You make it to the National Hockey League, and pro sports, is a different world, right? It's it's much more scrutinized, especially now with all the social media and everything. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's you and I went through it myself. I remember Frank Brown, he's retired now, correct, in the Hall of Fame and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. After a very long, lengthy career with as a journalist, he worked for the league, and then he ended up getting in the Hall of Fame, winning the Elmer Ferguson. Award for his writing ability.
That's right. When he was with the Daily News, it must have been my first or second year. It might have been my second year because Herb was coaching. And I remember, and Frank and I had always gotten along great, And I admittedly, I was having a bad stretch. I didn't think it was that bad. And Frank wrote an article about me just ripping me, like how I wasn't prepared and all this kinds of stuff. And I was offended. I was like, how could he be doing this to me? And I wouldn't talk to him for like 2 or 3 weeks. I sulked. I think back about it now, I laugh about it and finally he came up to me, to his credit, he came up to me and said, Tom, listen, you're not playing well. I'm actually doing you a favor. I'm doing my job and I need to write about the fact that you're not playing well, but I'm actually doing you a favor. You're a way better hockey player than you're performing right now. And I stopped for a second. It's like, oh, wow. I didn't get it. Nobody had ever ripped me before. And nobody ever wrote a negative article about me before. All my way up, all the articles that were written about me, I was just, fantastic player destined for the National Hockey League, and all of a sudden Frank Brown, who was my buddy, was ripping me. And I've said this to him in the past. I thank him because it was a great lesson for me. And both as a player and as a person to realize, yeah, you're right. Just like you said, I should have looked at myself. I shouldn't have had to have Frank Brown tell me I wasn't playing well. I should have been able to look at my own career and realize I wasn't playing well at that time.
Well, I think people, and particularly fans, sort of undervalue the watchdog function of the press. And, I've had discussions with fans and they say, look, I get that, we need the press to hold the government officials accountable, but, this is sports. And I say, well, yeah, but look at it this way. Like when you buy season tickets, like you're not a shareholder of the team, but in theory, you could see yourself as that because the 14,000 season ticket holders keep the team in business. And if you don't, if 14,000 of you don't buy those season tickets, a team can struggle, as the Florida Panthers and the Arizona Coyotes kind of prove. So I think they owe you something for that. I think they need to treat you with respect, and I think they need to make sure they have a responsibility to you as a season ticket holder, or even as a fan who buys, 3 jerseys for his kids every year and goes to 5 games and pays the parking fees. I think they have responsibility to do the best to give you a good product. So it's my job as a journalist to hold everybody accountable. That if I see that the the ownership of a team doesn't care as much as the ownership, of a particular team does, it's up to me to point that out, so that you're armed with information, so you can make a judgment about, whether you want to continue that. And also, there are other issues as well, like injuries is another thing. People say, well, why do you got to report injuries? Well, there is some value to you as a season ticket holder. Like, for example, it's hard for you to shell out $3,000 per ticket for that. And, there's value to, say, if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, to your row 14 tickets. And say that Sidney Crosby is going to miss a month. And you say to yourself, well, I can't afford to go all 42 games. I got to sell 15. Well, maybe those are the 15 you want to sell, because, your boy Sid isn't going to be there, and you're going to sell those tickets. And I think that is the, reason, and, just some of the explanation of why, as a watchdog, we perform a function.
And see, it's funny too, because now that we talk about it, like when you're a player, especially early in your career, you don't think of the reporter as a conduit to the fans. You just see that personal point of view. And quite frankly, in a lot of cases, guys are like, they're tired after the game. Maybe they played bad. They're annoyed. And the reporter's just like aggravating to him, right? He's asking all these questions. The last thing you want to do is answer for why you didn't play well. So, but you're right. You're not, as a player, you always don't realize that, just like you just said, you're really talking to the fans. Like, you're sending a message to the fans, right? And the fans are the lifeblood of the game. If you don't have the fans coming to the game, we don't get paid. There is no National Hockey League. So, no, I agree. And I think that's something you just don't recognize that as that young player. And it's funny, like, I know you and I, before we got going here, was like talking about how we would both feel if we were going through this right now. And you raised an interesting point about how losing that one-on-one interaction with that player, I never really would have looked at it that way as a player. I guess as a player, I start to think, there heard some of the comments by LeBron James talking about how he didn't really want to play games unless there was fans in the building. And it made me think, like, I coached a lot of youth sports. A lot of these games that the kids play in, there really isn't a lot of people in the building. The parents are there and everything. There's not like a big crowd, but I still remember it being exciting. Like, if you had a big moment in a game, I remember I coached a couple seasons ago with John Tonelli. We were in a tournament, and our guys came back, and it was a big goal, like 2 seconds left to play, and it was great for the kids. They were just as fired up. It didn't matter how many people were in the building. It made me think back about some of the moments with these kids. So, like, I guess as a player, thinking going forward, if we are going to play without fans, I mean, listen, it's not as great as it is when, Madison Square Garden is a packed building, but I still think it'll be just as exciting, playing in the National Hockey League without fans.
Well, I think so too. And we've seen that before. We've watched World Junior Championship games where there's not people in there, and early NCAA basketball tournament games, sometimes there's, not big crowds, and bowl games and football. When you're playing in the, what's the name of this bowl game in Tallahatchie, Florida, you're still excited about watching the game if you're a fan of that team, but sometimes not people in there. So I don't think I think the ratings are going to be unbelievable. And I think we're going to see some unique things. Like I think, for example, is that they're not going to want to have Pierre Maguire or Brian Boucher, I'm guessing, between the benches. That gives them close to the players.
Yeah.
So I think they'll just put a camera there, and the player will walk over and put a piece in his ear. And that's the other thing I'm hearing too, is they'll be more interactive. It'll look a little bit more like the XFL in the playoffs, just because it'll have to be different. Right. Because we all. So I think you'll go over, put that in your ear, and then somebody from a studio, will say, "Hey, Evgeny Malkin, what happened on that goal? Did you think it was a penalty?"
Right.
And Malkin will say, "Well, yeah, he pulled me down, that kind of thing." So, it's going to look a little different, but I think we all need to be open-minded when it does come, and however, saying all this, and I'm excited about everything I've heard, I still have reservations, because I wonder that one question, and I've repeated it over and over: what happens if someone tests positive? And I think that's the key issue. What happens? Are we talking he's just removed? And we all know, because we watch too much television and we read too much about this virus, that you can spread this when you're asymptomatic.
Oh, totally.
So by the time they remove this guy who's tested positive, his whole team could be affected.
I agree. Yeah. All right. We got a disagreement here. One of my old college, I think this is one of my old college teammates here, Mike Harris, and he's a Detroit native too, Detroit area native, disagrees with it. He thinks that glorified beer league if the NHL plays without fans.
Well, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I've seen how everybody treats us. I've talked to so many fans that are so pumped up about just watching this on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, people are.
You talked about.
I think it'll be the highest ratings ever.
Yeah, and you talked about it before. I never really. I mean, I somewhat would glance at the NFL draft, but I really never paid attention. I'm excited to watch the draft tomorrow. Like the NFL draft, live sports. Right?
I'm totally pumped up. I just said to my son-in-law today that I'm planning my menu, which, by the way, does not include any chia seeds.
What are you going to have? What are you going to have to watch the draft? Like chicken wings and stuff?
Well, that's what my son-in-law said he was going to have. I don't think so. There's a hamburger joint that I really like that is during this virus is selling out of a drive-in. It's not a fast food place. It's called Braze, and I may get something there. But I'll just have the normal guy stuff. Chips and
Kevin, why we could get some some chickpea pasta or something like that. Maybe with a little turkey sauce.
Perfect.
Really, you want that kind of stuff? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll have you send me a menu.
Okay.
And then I'll pass it along to my wife who doesn't eat meat.
Okay.
And she'll.
If you do want chicken wings, we can bake our chicken wings. Not ideal, like the skin, a lot of fat in the skin of it. You can bake the chicken wings instead of frying them.
Yeah.
Don't use any butter, sprinkle a little bit of low salt seasoning on it, something like that.
Yeah. No. All right. Well, I don't mind chicken wings, so we can talk about that. I do want to talk about the NHL draft because Frank Saravelli of TSN, a good reporter, wrote about the thought there's some discussion going on in the league, and I hadn't heard this, to be honest with you, because I was concentrating on who was going to play. But Frank's got it that they're thinking about just having the draft anyway in June because they want to, sort of create some excitement about the league again. And everybody, in the last several years, the draft's become more important in terms of the fan base. Fan bases are much more knowledgeable on the players. They, there's always a lot of discussion. There's two things that people root for. They root for their team to be successful, or they root for them to get a good draft position. Yep. That's become a secondary rooting interest.
Yep.
Is in Detroit all year. There was talking about being able to get into position.
Yep. And what was the draft going to be? Was it going to be
Montreal?
Montreal, that's right.
Yeah, and Lafreniere has been on the minds of Detroit fans, all season long.
Yeah.
So and I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I'm troubled by it. I understand it intellectually. I'm bothered by it emotionally, which is, I'm from the old school, so my team is my team. Yeah. And when I go to watch them play, I want them to win, regardless of whether it's going to be meaningful in the standings. But I get it, that it makes no sense for I'm from Detroit. I've watched the Lions for years. I'd like to see them win a Super Bowl. So I get it that if they win a game in December when they're 5-10. Yep. And that it's just ridiculous because it just costs them place in standing. But saying all that, getting back to what I was saying, there's more interest in the NHL draft now than ever before. And right now we got almost nothing going. We want to keep the NHL brand out there. Right. Everybody talking about it, and so there's been some discussion about doing it anyway. Now there's complications to that, because we haven't established exactly what the draft order is because we don't have the final standings. Yep. Some draft picks have been traded contingent upon where people are. Mm-hmm. The other issue, and I think this is a big one, is, if you do it in June, part of the draft now, and one of the reasons why it's an exciting time for fans is there's usually a trade or two or three that makes it interesting, and big players can be traded at the draft. And teams are going to need these big players to go into the playoffs, so they won't be trading them at the draft if we hold it in June. So
I think you got to have it.
Frank quoted some anonymous GMs as saying, they just didn't like it. Now,
but GMs are always going to complain about it too. Then when are you going to have it? If it happens the way you mentioned before at the start of the show, that they start and play the whole season, play the playoffs, and then start the next season right away. Well, when are you going to have the draft?
Well, here's what there's two things I would offer. One, I would just tell everybody that we're going to have it 48 hours after the completion of the season. And then you just do it, and then we start the season. That would be number one. Or now this sounds crazy, but think about it for a minute. Regardless of when we play the Stanley Cup final, right, once we get there, we're going to make it a big event. We're going to try to treat it like it's the Super Bowl, like we do now. And by that, I mean, we're going to try to fix it so it works best for television. And when we do that, what ends up happening is at least twice, sometimes 3 times, we have 2 days between games. Okay.
Right.
What about, and I'm throwing this out there because it may be a terrible idea, but it's an idea. But what if we make the draft on the first one of those off days when the players don't want to be made available to the media anyway, because there's not much to say after game one. So when we have those 2-day breaks between game 1 and 2, we hold the draft. Now we're going to hold it virtually anyway.
Right.
We're not all going to show up at this thing. So the only 2 teams who would be inconvenienced by this would be the 2 teams in the Stanley Cup. But why can't they just hole up in their hotel room? And they're living in a biosphere anyway. So
I love the idea of having it in June. I agree with all those issues you mentioned. I mean, the trades and all that kind of stuff, but these are unique circumstances right now. This has never happened before. So they're just going to have to make adjustments. It will not be perfect. I think you have to understand that it won't be perfect, but I agree with you. We're sitting around here right now. Look at all, like me, I'm a huge football fan, but I never usually watch the draft. I'm interested in watching the draft tomorrow for the National Football League. So I agree with you. So now you've got the NHL draft in June. Nothing's been going on. Hockey's like forgotten, right? Nobody's even paying attention to any sports because there's no sports to play. So, I mean, to me, I would have it the sooner the better. I would have it early in June. Yes, it will not be perfect. And, the order of the draft and all those kinds of things and the trades, but it's a big event. You have it, like you said, it's done virtually. Attention for the league, that's out of the way now. So then any decisions moving forward, you don't have to worry about the draft. It's already taken place. And now you can move ahead and have your next season and not have to worry, okay, how are we going to squeeze that in? So I think it's a great idea.
Well, you know what? I can't disagree with you. I mean, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here and throw that in. But, if they want to do it, they can find a way to do it. And it would be, I think fans would enjoy it, especially those who are fully invested. And there are some people with some just modest interest that I mean, we can't do it the way the NFL is. We can't do all 7 rounds. People would be bored out of their mind. But we can do the first round. So.
Yeah. Well, so why not though? Do you think definitely do the first round like they do the NHL anyway? So you have it
right.
the one night, and then the rest of the rounds are the next day. And the real diehard fan, he may sit there the whole day. What else is he going to do in some cases?
I guess so. But I mean, it's hard for in America. Now it's certainly not true in Canada. But in America, it's hard for anybody to know beyond the first round who.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's like you said. Be creative though. Like I thought, like Pierre McGuire's great at the draft. He's always got his opinion. That's one great thing about Pierre. Yeah. He's got his opinions. Get those guys going. Get the broadcasters that make it exciting. Right? They're the ones that know the players. They've got the information. They could have a field day, sit there all day long. They've been sitting around doing nothing too. So.
Yeah, but we do have to be a little bit careful that we don't start comparing ourselves to. The NBA and NFL drafts, because those are players that we recognize because we follow college, sports.
What did you think though, too? Well, I guess I don't know if you can get it all done. But I mean, like I love when they have those little features on those players, right? Those little vignettes where you maybe don't know the guy. They do it a lot in the Olympics, and they have a story. And you can do all that virtually now. I mean, you
can, but again, it's you're doing those vignettes based on college basketball or college football for the NFL and the NBA, right. Where now we're going to be doing those for high school players and for
think about all the human interest story. I mean, some kid.
Yeah, but not everybody has a. There might be. How many of them would there be? 10.
You don't need everybody though. You're not going to have a story on every guy. I mean, especially when you get to the later rounds, they move more quickly.
Yeah, but when you do the NFL and the NBA draft, they do have a story on every guy. Because they draft him and they have to talk about who he is.
Right, early in the draft, right? But they're the same as the NHL, aren't they? Where they like once you get to the later rounds, they're not giving.
Well, no, like if you're watching the Saturday draft coverage of the NFL, which I'm planning to do, in those late rounds, they'll have analysts there that will know about those guys.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's harder in hockey. Now there will be some guys.
Like Craig Button's excellent at it. Pierre Maguire, like I said.
Yeah.
I mean, do interviews with their coaches, their teammates, their family, stuff like that. I mean, you can do all that right now, right? I mean, you can do it all virtually on Zoom or.
I mean, well, that's what they're going to have to do. Yeah. I mean, the WNBA just held their draft, and I didn't see it, but I've read that they did such a good job that people were saying, hey, the NFL should pay attention to whatever they did. And the same would be true of the WNBA. Like, we wouldn't know much about those players. So maybe you're right. Maybe it can be done. I'd have to look at that. But anyway, I think that's a discussion that's ongoing, and people need to do that.
June 1st, do it.
And well, the other thing I'd bring up about the draft, and just to get your opinion on this, there's been some discussion about whether or not there should be some compensatory picks for teams that, at the trade deadline, gave up, draft assets for rental players and then only got 2 weeks out of them. And there's been the suggestion that, if you gave up a second round pick and then, you only got 2 weeks out of the player, or a third round pick, that you get at the end of that round, you'd get a pick.
I know. When I just think it's like, we're always trying, like the GMs are always, and a lot of my friends, I'm not trying to critical, but they're always trying to find some way. Lou Lamoriello is a master at always trying to find some way that's going to benefit his team. And that's what he should do. That's his job. But I just think at some point, listen, this is a unique situation. It may never happen like this again. It's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be people that are complaining, and it'll change the course of history for some organizations that they don't get a player that maybe they could have had a shot at. But I just think, go ahead and play it. Go ahead and get it done.
Tom, I think you would have made a great insurance adjuster, because the guy would come in and he'd say, look, the tree fell down and put a big hole in my garage. And you'd say, act of God, what are you going to do? Like, we can't pay for that. Like, that's just an act of God. Yeah. So, your commissioner of the NHL, Lamoriello, calls and says, look, we got green. We expected to get a full month or 6 weeks or whatever. And Tom, the adjuster, says, Lou, act of God.
Yep,
nothing we can do about it. Move on. Nothing to see here. Yeah. So anyway, I like it. Lou
will just quietly walk away and not say anything more about it. Lou will just drop
it. Now you always give me, oh my God, it's 33 minutes already. But real quick here, because, you give me grief because I think that Barry Trotz is a great coach and a decent human being as well. And your guy, Gerard Gallant, who I happen to like as well, interviewed in New Jersey. Is he the perfect choice for Jack Hughes?
He's the perfect choice for any team. I'm just shocked that, I'm shocked, when Calgary fired their coach, that maybe they did have discussions with him and want to go there. I don't know, but I just think, to me, what I like is what I love that he did in Vegas was he built what I felt was an atmosphere around the team, especially with young guys or guys who hadn't been real big role players on teams before. Don't worry about making your mistakes. I want you to go out there and play the game, play hard, and try to make things happen. You're not going to get benched just because you made a mistake. If you're not working hard enough, you're going to get benched. But if you're trying to do something and you make a mistake, then that's fine. You're going to get back out there again. That's what young players, especially like Hughes and all these other guys they've got, that's what they need. They can't be feeling like every time they make a mistake, they're going to be sitting on the bench for the next 10 minutes. They've got to play, but they've got to play hard. He's a demanding coach. He gets the most out of his guys, but he lets them develop to be the players that they're going to be. So I think he's a fantastic choice.
My quick 2 cents, He did exactly that for Steve Yzerman when he was his line mate. He was a good sounding board. He knew how to bring Yzerman under his wing. I think he'd be great for Hughes, and for all the reasons that Tom mentioned, he'd be good for that entire organization. I'm a big believer in Gerard Gallant as well. Anyway, you've been listening to Laidlaw and Allen. I'm Alan. He's Laidlaw. We'll be back next week.
See you next week, guys.